Hello and welcome to Souq Exclusive. I am Blessing AG. Now, whenever you get to watch Souq Exclusive, you know that it has to be a very great personality that is in the studio, and there is an important issue to look at. It's not your regular show, it's just something extra, and that's why it's Souq Exclusive. Yeah, today we have someone who's doing advocacy in something that is quite new in this part of the world, and it's a bit controversial, but don't worry, when we get right into it, you understand why it's a bit controversial. I have Dr. Oyinkansola Jinodu, who is an entrepreneur. She's also an educationist. She educates people, maybe not within the four walls of a classroom, but she provides some form of education to people on very key issues of life. And she's also the founder and board chairperson of Honey Drops Foundation Africa. And they're doing something very, very wonderful this season for young adults. You get to know all of that. I do not want to let all the cats out of the bag yet, so that, yes, you can stay. Okay, welcome, Dr. Oyinkansola Jinodu.
Thank you so much, Miss Blessing. Thanks for having me.
She calls me Miss Blessing. Makes me feel like we're in an office, but...
No, I'm sorry, it's just okay. That's okay.
But it's good to have you. Oh, just Blessing.
Blessing? Okay.
All right, and she's looking very beautiful. So when you see her, you think, is she a makeup artist? Is she a fashion designer? Well, she's a fashionista from what I see, but she's into the building of people. She's into helping young people find themselves and overcome certain traumas that they may have had to deal with in life. Now, we're looking at domestic violence today, but talking about domestic violence, it isn't a new topic. All over the world, there are advocacy against domestic violence, and it just so happens that oftentimes the victims of domestic violence are women or people of the female gender. That is not to say that men are not victims sometimes, but most times you find that women are victims of domestic violence. Let's talk about that.
So you're right. Thank you so much for having me once again. And you're not wrong to say I'm a lot of things. I'm what you call a multi-potentialite. I actually started my career as a makeup artist. So
okay.
And I ventured into several things. But the one thing that I know that God has led me to really be passionate about, even though I have never firsthand experienced it, is domestic abuse. And domestic abuse is something that doesn't become domestic abuse just at that point that it happens. It starts from way back. And that's where my organization, when we started out in 2016, we realized that this was a deep-seated issue beyond what we were seeing. That's beyond the fact that women were getting killed at an alarming rate, and a lot of families were being broken up at a very, very expedited rate. And I was wondering, like, why is nobody saying anything, or why is nobody doing anything about this? And this is in the diaspora. And I started to do some research and just did not even know what I was getting myself into at the time. However, it just happened that one event that I decided to do to raise awareness to domestic abuse became the flagship program that we used to establish the nonprofit. So domestic abuse is a global issue, first of all, but it's a human issue. It's not a gender-based issue. Yes, the UN has termed gender-based violence as an SDG, which is a sustainable development goal that we're trying to achieve in Africa. However, domestic abuse is a human issue, period, because it affects both men and women. And we decided to focus on the youth because we realized from research that if women are becoming abused and things are happening in adulthood, did it just start at that point? No, it did not. It started from when a kid was bullied in school. It started from when a kid was being a bully and nobody did anything to actually try to figure out how to correct the behavior early on, change their mindset, and on and on and on, and behavioral patterns that went on into adulthood. So we targeted the youth as our demographic audience to help educate them, elevate them from that negative norm that they've become accustomed to, and then empower them to think differently. Because when you take something away from a child, if you don't put something in their hands to replace what you've taken away,
They're going to cry.
you're creating a void, and they're going to cry. And when they cry, what do? They act out. They throw tantrums, just like adults. So we empower them with something we feel like would help them become more contributors, members of society.
Okay, so you talked about caring for the young adults, having some form of empowerment for some of them who have been victims of domestic violence. But what are those things that could make a person a bully? Because it takes a bully to have domestic violence from childhood. What are some of the mistakes that parents make that turn kids into being bullies? Let's even look at the bully first before those they bully.
The bully, exactly. That's a really good question. So it's a psychological pattern, right? When kids are developing, we have two things that impact development. During my master's program, I studied. Well, I have a major in psychology. There's the environmental factors, and there's the innate nature of a person. So we now begin to see that those two things come together to make a human being. So what things impact and actually allows a person to develop who they become? All of the things that contribute. So what are they exposed to? Who are they exposed to? What examples are they seeing? Children do more of what they see happen than what you tell them to do.
Yes.
Unfortunately so. And if a lot of kids and a lot of adults are very unaware of the fact that when you're in a home and in an environment where the parents are having arguments and fighting, and sometimes there's several actions being taken, those kids are looking at that and they're modeling it. And it's actually going into what we call their long-term residual memory, and it eventually forms who they become without them even actively wanting to be that person. Have you ever heard, or have you ever been a victim of, like, you see your parents and like, oh, I'm never going to be like that. My mom, I'm never. And then one day you wake up as a parent and you're like, oh my God.
You're exactly like
them. Like, no, I always wanted not to be this person. That is the human, that's just the way we all are. And that's the way it is for kids as well. So I'm not saying that every child that is a bully comes from a home that bullying is modeled, but they're exposed. And then when those behavioral patterns begin to show up, whether in the home, whether they picked it up in the home or not, when those patterns begin to show up, a lot of parents will excuse it away, like, oh, he's just being a child. Or they will try to correct the behavior in an aggressive way, thereby reinforcing the aggression on that child. So it's a very weird dynamic, but usually it happens from when a child is born, and you have nature versus nurture. The nature is the person, that's who they are, the genetics, and the nurturing is the environment, the influences, the experiences, the things that we allow them to watch, the things that we allow them to see. So yeah.
Okay, let's talk about nurture. Because it takes a community or an entire village to raise someone. That's the belief in Africa. So a child is growing up in a home and begins to exhibit tendencies of a bully. Maybe in school it is observed, and then the teacher tells the parents, oh, this child is acting out, and there's certain things that he should or shouldn't be doing, especially when they're angry. But there's this thing between teachers and parents. They don't seem to agree a lot when it comes to how to raise children. It's either the parents are saying, oh, it's none of your business, it's my child. All you need to do is provide education, or you cannot discipline. So how do we handle nurturing of children?
That's a good question, because actually in the US, my career started out as an educator in the classroom, actually.
Oh.
I taught in the classroom for about 7 years.
So I was totally right when I said she's an educationist.
I taught in the classroom for about 7 years, and one of the things that I experienced there is what you're talking about. A lot of parents who come in and say, my child is this, or my child is unable to do X, Y, Z. For me, having an African orientation, like you said, it takes a village. I'm like, no, that should not be the case. You and I should work together. However, as a parent, I'm a huge proponent of the fact that your child's education starts from the home, holistically, not just the academics, right? The academics is math, English, science, and all that good stuff. That does not make the human. Those are just skills that they acquire over time to do and be stuff in society. But the human himself, herself, has to be educated from the home. work ethic, behavioral philosophies, principles, all those things, spiritual nature of that child, what they believe in, how they conduct themselves. It is a complete responsibility of the parents. Now, when it comes to interacting with educators, a lot of parents are extremely ignorant and they just feel like they are, I don't know. And I tell a lot of parents, I'm like, you're just setting this child up to fail. And at the end of the day, when it gets to the end of the line, it's too late for you to correct it. So while you're fighting me as the enemy, like I'm coming against you and your child, you should be teaming up with me as your
Partner.
helper to help you. Because really, I can educate your child in isolation. Whether he learns or not, that's on, it's okay, it's neither here nor there, and just ignore. But educators that really care, they would want to address the whole person, who they're becoming, and who they are in class and in school and at home. So a lot of parents should actually be more, like I tell my kids' teachers, I'm like, look, I know in America you're not allowed to whoop kids, but look, if you need my cell phone, just text me, and they know. I have 3 boys, I show up and I'm there. Like I've taken extreme measures because kids are kids, and I'm not one parent to say, oh, my kids are perfect. No, they're not. I've had to be in school with my kids and I sit in the classroom, I'm like, okay, we're going to school together today. How you feel about that? If that's what we need to do, because I'm going to make sure that your teacher can do her job, his job, and I'll make sure I do my job. We do it together because we're not going to let you fail. That's the way it should be.
Okay, so now they've left the childhood stage. Now they become teenagers or young adults. There's this thing you talk about, or people are beginning to talk about, in regards to domestic violence, teen dating violence. When I opened the show, I talked about how controversial it is. Now, in this part of the word, you do not mention the word teen and dating. They're like 2 words that should not be in the same sentence because it's assumed, oh, at the time you should focus on your education, focus on getting your life set, but not talking about dating. Many parents would not want to hear their 15-year-old, your 16-year-old is in a relationship. Not to talk about being abused in that relationship. So some teenagers, even when they encounter such, want to keep it to themselves because like, hush, hush, do not let mom hear it, not let dad hear. But we'll talk more about that after this quick break. Just stay tuned.
My name is Okole Chukwemeka Maxwell. Lagos is a center of excellence.
Yeah, Lagos has been so helpful to me. And so meaningful, a promising land indeed. So I've never been in Lagos.
My name is Femi. Lagos is the land of opportunity for me. I joined to Lagos a few years ago for work, and it's been leaps and bounds since then. I like the fact that it has opportunity for people to grow. If you are smart enough, you can get as high as you need to get to.
All right, many thanks for staying tuned to Souq Exclusive, and we'll still have Dr. Oyikonsola Jinodu in the studio. She is an entrepreneur and she's also the founder, board chairperson, Honey Drops Foundation Africa, and she's here talking about domestic violence. And now we've gotten into teen dating violence. Ever heard of that before, where it's been a concept that handles the troubles, the violent troubles that teens encounter in their relationship. And before we went on that break, I did say that something like that is not much talked about in a place like Nigeria because of some cultural issues, how parents want to frown at their teens being in relationship, but it is a reality that a lot of teens are in relationship. So, Oyikonsola, talk to me about teen dating violence. How did we get to that part that a kind of concept has been carved out to handle violence in teen relationship? Isn't that like encouraging what should not be?
I think it's the reverse, because when you look at kids in school from when they're young, right, they're interacting with one another. And I mean, I guess given the evolution of humans, you see that puberty sets on earlier than we experienced it. Like we have kids at 9, even 8, getting at least starting puberty in a lot of cases. So now that means their brain, the chemistry in their brain, their body is evolving, is shifting. But let's leave that alone. Let's look at the results that we're getting. And if it's working so far, that's good. We can keep doing it. We have kids under 12 getting pregnant. We have 13-year-olds getting pregnant. Mothering children, actually, because they were pregnant, they didn't even know they were pregnant because they got engaged in sexual activity. Some of them were raped and abused, and they just woke up one day, saw things happening. They didn't even understand. All of a sudden, boom, they're having a baby. And so if this is what we're getting, how is that working out so far? Like how people will say, how markets? So if that's not working well, then let's begin to reverse the order of things to say, okay, let's look at it from a reverse direction. Abnormal norms have literally taken over. Everything in society now is, we live in an upside down world, literally, whether you want to accept it or not. But the sooner we accept that reality, especially in Nigeria, which is why I was so motivated to say, okay, I think this is a good time for me to come home and establish this and introduce this to our community. Teen dating is a reality. Whether Nigerians or Africans want to talk about it or not, it's happening at a very alarming rate, if I do say so myself, given the level of poverty, which also instigates the high incidence of those relationships. Because when there is a high poverty rate in a nation, parents are put out there to hustle more to make ends meet. Kids are caught between the cracks of not being supervised at all times or even left to fend for themselves. And how do they do that? They just take on whatever is thrown at them, whether it's right or wrong. They don't know, and then they accept it as the norm. Now, when we talk about the violent part of it, when we look at our society and the way things are done, kids in schools, they go through bullying and all these things. It's like, even you look at all these, what do they call them? All these cliques and girls against girls and, social media. It's cool for you to use certain words on yourselves and insult each other and talk to each other in a very downgraded way. And it's normal. Now they get in these relationships with these so-called boys and girls, and it's like, the things that the boys have seen modeled to them as that's the way a man is, you're masculine. If she talks to you anyhow, give her a slap, that kind of thing. And then to the females, it's like sometimes they are on the giving end as well. Because now it's like, I can't take any rubbish from any man. That's the way I've seen my parents, and then they want to repeat that. So now violence is coming from left and right. Both the male and the female are perpetuating it. Unfortunately, both the male and the female are also receiving it. And the ones that are on the receiving end, unfortunately, take it as normal. Oh, he hit me. Oh, he loves me. He didn't mean to. He loves me so much. That's the way, a man shows that he loves you, when I get out of line. And I've even heard it say, some females, if you don't hit them, they don't feel like you're man enough, you're strong enough. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Very negative theories.
Exactly, abnormal norms. Or he's so possessive, he's very jealous. Oh, he talks down at me. He says certain things to me. He calls me out of my name. That means he cares. No, he does not. That's not love. And if, those things we really need to educate. And that's where we come in, because it's happening right in front of us. So whether we choose to address, it's like saying whether the government chooses to address global warming or not, it is happening right before our eyes. And if we don't step in and try to at least prevent it or at least change the cycle for those kids, we're just going to end up with more of the same. Domestic violence victims, we're going to end up with more of the same. Fathers being taken out of homes and put in jails, and now we have single parent homes. We have broken families, even if they're not single parent homes. Now we have this dysfunction being repeated over and over and over. But it doesn't just start from when they get into adulthood. It doesn't just start from when a man and a woman gets married. It starts from when that young boy, that young girl starts doing or understanding certain ways and accepting it, or being certain things that society is like, oh, it's normal. Or it might not be normal, but nobody's really paying attention. And it's like they say, when you know better,
You do better.
You do better.
Okay, so it's like that's the basis upon which domestic violence thrives. From teen dating, it seemed like, oh, this is the way relationship is run. You can abuse me, I can abuse you. It depends on who has the power enough to be the abuser.
There you go.
So
I love it. I love it. That is it. It depends on who has
the power enough to be the abuser.
It.
So
exactly.
once they get into marriage, it becomes like a normal thing. So addressing domestic violence seemed like, let's get to the root of the matter first, where it first starts to show itself, which is teen dating. But for your foundation, taking this up as a key issue, as the reception like when you put teens together, when you get into schools and you say, we want to talk to your teens about this, we want to educate them and even find out those who have been victims, how we can help them. What's the reception like?
So for me, I guess being an educator, I taught middle schoolers, teenagers, that very interesting age where they're confused and they're like nice to you one day, they're horrible to you the next day, and they don't know who they are. And then you see them 2 years later, they're so wonderful, and I'm like, where was this child when you were in my classroom? But that's such a critical age. But the thing I've found is being able to meet kids where they're at. So I've had to, in developing our curriculum, I've had to learn a lot of teen language.
Okay.
I've had to learn a lot of ways to communicate with children, with young adults, to be able to get on their level. I put a lot of effort into my parents, because when I show up, they're like, oh, we like, kids, girls, they automatically just gravitate towards me. It's like they like something about me. It's either they like my hair, my this, my that. Then the conversation starts. And then of course the boys, like just being a boy mom, I'm like, I know not perfectly, but I learn how to relate to boys and try to just get them comfortable around me and just talk to them. And that's really it. Kids, honestly, we don't give them enough credit. And it's not a conversation we have where we're like talking at them. This is what you need to do. No. It's a conversation like, tell me, what's your experience been like? How many people have boyfriends here? Tell me, don't lie. Let's talk about it. How did your boyfriend toast you? You'll start those conversations like this.
To get into them.
You warm up to them, you get them to open up, and they start talking. Next thing, you just start asking all these probing questions where they don't feel invaded, but they also know that, this is something they will talk about with their friends and their girlfriends, and they're like, they feel comfortable. So that's how we model it. It's such an interactive session, and the kids love it. They open up, and then by the time it's done, you find out that it's an alarming data. At least 3 in 4 would have experienced.
3 in 4.
Yes.
That's huge.
Yes, that's 90%.
Wow.
Would have experienced some type of violence, whether it's emotional, because it's not just physical, right? Whether it's emotional, which they don't even know that's a thing. Whether it's verbal,
they think is normal, but the effect is not normal.
Thank you. Yeah, and then it's like you start to see that they've experienced it, and it's an alarming statistics. And you start breaking it down to them. There's verbal, and when you explain what verbal is, they're like, oh, I didn't even know. Or there's emotional. When you start explaining, and then when we get into the point where we talk about the 8 cycles of abuse, the grooming part, the part where, all those things, the isolation, they start connecting the dots. Oh, that's why he doesn't want me to be friends with these people.
Or she doesn't want
me around these people, because around those people, they can easily identify and get you help and get you out of that situation. So we show them all those things, and all of a sudden the light bulb comes on. And now we have kids who are enlightened, who are empowered. And then what we go on to do is we now offer to help them become peer advocates.
Okay.
Because that's really the goal. Each one teach one. What you've learned here today. We do a check for understanding, and we do, we check for understanding, and we also do like an evaluation at the end. What are the top 3 things you learned? That makes you a peer advocate. Now go out there. If you see something, say something. If you see someone this, speak up, and this. So we empower them to be their peer advocates. And that's really the movement we're creating in schools, that we see that will work. I don't really know how quickly it will catch on, but the work is ongoing. It will be ongoing, of course.
So it's very possible for one to be abused and not know they're being abused until it gets to a level where the toxicity they get from the relationship is overwhelming. All right. So for the events you'll be having tomorrow, what is going to be like? What shape will it take? And what's the objective beyond just talking to kids? There's some other aspects.
Oh yes, so we're having our very first Honey Drops Foundation Teen Dating Violence Awareness Conference. We've had it in the US for 2 years and bringing it home to Africa. Basically, it's a very full program. We have some entertainment locked in there.
Okay.
We need to entertain these kids. Trust me, you can't go sit down and talk to kids all day expecting them to listen. I don't know if you know Vanessa Jones. She's a Kid Wonder R&B artist who's going to be our youth ambassador here.
Okay.
So she'll be performing. She actually wrote a song I'll send it to you, really nice.
Okay.
She did a really nice soundtrack for us for this program that we will use as we go on as well. So of course we have a program. We have it broken down into segments. We're going to talk a little bit about finance. We're going to talk a little bit about education.
Interesting.
That's the empowerment portion of it.
Finance for teens.
It's not just heavy teen dating. We start off with that, then we say, okay, now you know this. This is what you do. We give them tools, we give them strategies. Then we just throw in a bit of empowerment. We have limited time to do this, but the goal holistically is to establish what Honey Drops Foundation is doing in Africa is establishing our program here for our youth, the Teen Dating Violence Program, which includes empowerment, elevation, and education, and also establishing a new program that we know is needed here.
Okay.
Because we have several programs and we just don't want to throw everything here due to understanding the cultural needs of every society. So we're going to be developing female youth leaders. That's specifically female youth leaders because there's a gap in really empowering and getting these young girls, young females ready for taking up high-level positions in life. We will be very selective in that particular program. We will be working specifically with college-age young women, and we will be very targeted in how we make our selection and the people that we put through that program, because it's a year-long program where they get to experience mentorship, they get scholarships, they get to receive a lot of hands-on training from C-suite executives, philanthropic CEOs like myself, founders of industry and things like that.
So it's going to be a wonderful one, a complete package. I like the fact that you're going to add finance to it because that's something that is often lacking in conferences of such nature. But for those who they know about Honey Drops Foundation and are wondering, and now that they know, how can they be part of it? If they can't be part of tomorrow's event, how can they help your teenagers, maybe parents, maybe schools? What's the way to connect?
Amazing. We're rounding up real quick. honeydropsfoundation.org, at Honey Drops Foundation, social media. Those are our handles, at Honey Drops Foundation, and honeydropsfoundation.org is our website. We need donors, we need volunteers, we need people who want to just support. We're working with local governments, state governments, and federal. We're starting from Mushi local government, and we're going to cover every local government in Lagos State, and we're going to spread to every state in Nigeria eventually, federal, and then key cities in Africa. That's the strategy. So if you want to be part of this, honeydropsfoundation.org, at Honey Drops Foundation is our social media handle. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yukinsula Ajinodu, for being in our studio today and talking extensively about domestic violence and teen dating violence. All right, the mystery has been unveiled. We've told you all about teen dating violence. Now you know if you've got a teen, because here at Souq News, our core basically is about business, economy, and development. And you cannot develop a people without being conscious of their mental well-being, their physical well-being, their social well-being. So attending to them at this stage sounds like catch them young, so they develop as a whole human being. No part is in peace, but everything comes together and that person becomes a whole human being that can function rightly and encourage and make the pace of development in Nigeria and Africa faster. Again, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Souq News.
I am Blessing AJ. Thank you for watching.